as we've advised in advance that this session is being recorded. Also, a nomination pack is available which contains nomination papers as well as other supporting information. So we'll email that to all attendees after this session along with a link to the recording. If you prefer a hard copy of the nomination pack, if you let the election office team know and they'll arrange this for you. So listen, good evening. My name's Paul Manning and I'm the returning officer, and can I welcome you to this nomination awareness session for the South Lanarkshire Council Ward 5 Avondale and Stonehouse by-election. So thank you for attending and hopefully you'll find this useful. I'd also like to introduce Nikki Jarvie, who's one of my deputy returning officers. So Nikki's in the room with me, and online we've got Laura Jardine, who's our elections officer. So the aims for the session are summarised on your agenda. So firstly, to provide information on standing at the by-election and the nomination process, to highlight key dates on the timetable of election, to discuss what happens after the close of nominations, to provide information on local contacts and arrangements for the by-election, and to provide an opportunity to ask questions. So some of you will be well versed in the nomination process, but for the benefit of all attendees, I'm going to cover what you'll need to know to assist you in considering whether to submit nomination papers and stand as a candidate. There's a useful amount or a reasonable amount of information provided to you in the nomination pack that I'm sure you'll find useful. I'll work through the agenda, but please feel free to ask any questions by using the raise hand function if you're online. And obviously, if you just make me aware if you're in the room, and of course, there'll be further opportunity to ask questions at the end. So the first slide that we're going to cover are the aims of the returning officer. So in terms of the returning officer and the electoral registration officer responsibilities, we're going to cover these in the next couple of slides. Now, there's often confusion on the roles of the returning officer and the electoral registration officer. So those are abbreviated as the RO for the returning officer and the ERO for the electoral registration officer. Now, a bit of this confusion is probably due to the fact that in England, the returning officer and ERO is often the same person, but in Scotland, that's not the case. The two positions are legally distinct. In Scotland, the returning officer is often the chief executive of the council, but there are some exceptions. And the returning officer is personally responsible for the running of the election and can appoint deputies with full or specific powers to assist. So as returning officer, I have in place an elections team, which is led by Nikki, who will carry out the day-to-day running of the by-election, and she's likely to be your first point of contact. So, as returning officer, a summary of my aims are to ensure that candidates, agents, media and the public accept and have confidence in the by-election arrangements and results, that the by-election is transparent to those scrutinising and observing the process, and that assistance is given to candidates and agents to understand what's involved in the count. That clear and helpful information is provided to candidates and agents both prior to and during the various events, and that the number of queries or complaints that may arise is reduced and kept to a minimum. So to assist in achieving the above, please contact the elections team as soon as any issues arise that we might be able to help with. Now, the electoral registrations officer, and in Scotland, that person is appointed by the local authority. They're responsible for the preparation and maintenance of the register of electors and the lists of absent voters within their area. So the electoral registration officer for South Lanarkshire is Jacqueline Dell. Now, the key deadline dates for the electoral registration officer are as follows, and you can see these on that slide on the screen. The registration deadline is midnight on Tuesday, the 1st of September. The deadline for new postal votes and postal proxy applications and for changes to existing postal or proxy arrangements is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of September. Cancellations to existing postal and proxy arrangements must be made by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of September. The deadline for new proxy applications is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 9th of September. And the deadline for emergency proxy applications is 5 p.m. on polling day, which will be Thursday, the 17th of September. Now, the next slide talks about others who are involved in election arrangements. So in addition to the election team at South Lanarkshire, the key bodies involved in the by-election include the Electoral Commission. Now, the Electoral Commission are responsible for registration of political parties, campaign election expenses, reporting on election arrangements, and providing guidance. There are many helpful documents on their website, which you can see. You can see the address on the screen. It's not right, but it is www.electoralcommission, all one word, all lowercase, .org.uk. Am I right in saying, Nikki, in the nominations pack, there's a copy of that link in there?
There's all the guidance as well.
The second bullet point, the second other party involved in the elections arrangements are the Scottish Government. Now, they're responsible for the legislation that regulates local government elections and put in place a contract from which local authorities can appoint a supplier to deliver the electronic count arrangements. So just remembering that local government elections are delivered through an electronic count. We've also got other suppliers. So I have appointed Mailmetrics, so they were previously known as Criticom, as the supplier who will produce our poll cards, and iDocs Elections as a supplier who will produce the ballot papers and postal voting packs. Fujitsu have been appointed to run the electronic count, that's the e-count, in partnership with iDocs. The Royal Mail are also involved. They provide a mailing service to candidates, and the documentation is contained in your nomination pack, detailing that as a service. Police Scotland are also involved. Police officers will visit polling places periodically on polling day and will attend the count. So, the next slide talks about South Lanarkshire Council Ward 5, Avondale and Stonehouse by-election. There's an election to elect one councillor for Ward 5. So this ward is a 3-councillor ward, but there's only one vacancy. So this by-election will only elect a single councillor for that vacancy. The voting system used is the single transferable vote system, and voters will be asked to rank candidates in order of preference using numbers, that is 1, 2, 3, and so on. Voters are not required to rank more than one candidate and can rank as many or as few as they wish. If a voter repeats the same number, that is 1 and 1, their vote won't be counted. So there's a reference, I think, there to quota. The quota is the minimum number of votes necessary to be elected, and that's defined as the valid votes cast divided by the number of seats to be filled plus one vote. So, for example, in this by-election, we've got 1 seat to fill, so the quota will be the number of valid votes cast divided by 1 seat to be filled plus one vote. So by using an electronic counting method, the first preferences, so that's the number 1s that get put on the ballot papers, are counted. If a candidate gets enough 1s to reach or exceed the quota, they get elected. If no one reaches or exceeds the quota, the candidate with the least number of votes is excluded and their votes get transferred. Those votes are transferred to the other candidates based on the next available preference marked on the ballot paper. If no one reaches or exceeds the quota, the count continues by eliminating the next candidate who has the least number of votes and continues until a candidate reaches or exceeds the quota. If only two candidates are remaining at the end, then the candidate having the most votes at that stage is elected, even though they might not have reached the quota. So we will give more information on this in the e-count process at future briefings. So the next slide covers the election timetable. So the timetable for the Scottish local government elections spans 35 working days. And a copy of the main dates is provided in the nomination pack. And it's probably worth highlighting a couple of the key dates. So the notice of the election was published last Friday on the 31st of July. And the nomination period began yesterday on Monday, the 3rd of August. And nominations can be lodged any weekday between 10 AM and 4 PM until the statutory deadline of 4 PM on Monday, the 17th of August. We cannot accept nominations lodged after that deadline. Pre-checks can be carried out during normal working hours, and I would strongly encourage you to submit your papers for checking as early as possible. You must make an appointment to formally submit your nomination papers, and appointments can be made by contacting the election office on 01698 45 4745 or emailing elections@southlanarkshire.gov.uk. Nomination papers must be delivered by hand. So the key dates regarding registration and absent voting we've already highlighted to you. So can you stand for election? So to stand for this election, you must have attained the age of 18 years or over at the day of nomination, be a British citizen, an Irish citizen, an eligible Commonwealth citizen, or a qualifying foreign national, and you must not be disqualified from standing. Also, at least one of the following. You must be a registered local government elector for the local authority area, occupied as owner or tenant of land or premises in the local authority area during the whole 12 months preceding nomination, your principal or only place of work, that includes unpaid work, during the last 12 months in the local authority area, or have lived in the local authority area during the last 12 months. So at least one of those four things. Matters of eligibility or disqualification are detailed further in the nomination pack. We cannot provide advice on matters relating to eligibility, and if you have any questions, you should contact the Electoral Commission. As part of the nomination process, the candidate will require to sign a declaration that they are qualified to stand for election. Okay, the next slide covers why you. Political representation from a wide range of backgrounds and diversity is encouraged and supported. We welcome and actively encourage interest in standing as a candidate from underrepresented groups within our community. COSLA, that's the umbrella organisation for Scottish local government, previously ran a campaign entitled Why You? The campaign aimed to encourage people to consider standing for election and highlights some of the successes of COSLA's Barriers to Elected Office Special Interest Group. The campaign also features personal experiences of councillors who have been elected, as well as useful information to help you stand on their website. And again, a link's given in the nomination pack. So further information on standing as a councillor can be obtained from the Electoral Commission's website and also the Improvement Services website. So again, those links are in that nomination pack if you want to go through to that. So the next slide gives some top tips for nomination papers. That Electoral Commission website that I referred to, it does contain a wealth of information on how to complete your nomination papers. Can I encourage you to take the time to review all of that supporting information? But just remember, the elections team will be on hand to answer any questions that you've got about those papers. The nomination papers must be completed in English, and there are parts which have very specific rules for completion. This includes how you specify your full name and your full home address. The home address form must be completed and submitted with your nomination papers. If you do not wish your home address to be made public, you must indicate in which relevant area your home address is situated. This will appear on the notice of poll and ballot paper. For this by-election, the relevant area is the electoral ward in which the address is situated, and more information is contained in your pack regarding this. Your signature and your witness details are a very important aspect of the form. Both the candidate and witness must sign the nominations form. Candidate descriptions depend on whether you are a party or an independent candidate. So, for example, if you're standing for a party, your description could be the South Lanarkshire Party or the Scottish South Lanarkshire Party. You must be authorised to use the party's name. Full information on this is provided in your pack. If you are an independent candidate, you can only use independent as your description. So what happens after the close of nominations? I've scheduled a post-nomination session on Tuesday the 18th of August, so that's a fortnight today, in the council headquarters, Almada Street, Hamilton, and via Teams, so basically the same time, same place in a fortnight. And what that briefing will provide you with is the list of candidates standing. So that is a statutory notice of poll and statement of persons nominated, the list of election agents for each of the candidates, the appointment of polling, counting and postal vote agents form to allow you to request passes, which I'd ask you to return as quickly as possible to allow a final allocation of passes to be determined. And also at that briefing, we'll cover an update on the preparation for the poll, the postal votes and the count. You'll automatically be invited to attend that briefing session to ensure that you're aware of the next steps being taken by me for the poll, the postal votes and the count. Poll cards. So poll cards will be dispatched to Royal Mail on Monday the 17th of August in good time to inform voters of the deadlines for voting arrangements. One additional run of poll cards will thereafter be sent out to those registered by midnight on Tuesday the 1st of September, which is the registration deadline. Right. Postal votes is the next slide. So the current postal electoral vote for this election is around 2,600. The deadline for postal vote applications has already been highlighted, so that's 5 p.m. on Wednesday the 2nd of September. Application forms are downloadable from the Electoral Registration Office website or from, and again this link is in the nominations pack, www.gov.uk/register to vote. Postal votes will be posted first class around Friday the 4th of September. We are in regular dialogue with Royal Mail and we're encouraging voters to complete and return their postal voting packs as early as possible. Opening of postal votes. So postal votes will be opened from Thursday the 10th of September, and more details of the opening sessions will be provided in due course. Postal voters are required by law to provide their signature unless a waiver is obtained and their date of birth on the postal voting statement, which is then returned with their ballot paper. The signature and date of birth are compared with those provided at the time of applying for the postal vote And if either of those don't match, or if there's information missing, then the postal vote will be rejected and therefore not included in the count. I am keen to ensure that as few postal votes are rejected as possible and to put arrangements in place to raise awareness of the procedures followed. So please ensure that you're aware of the Electoral Commission's Code of Conduct on handling of postal votes. In that, you're asked to adhere to two key principles. Firstly, uphold the secrecy of the ballot. And secondly, don't place yourselves in a position where your honesty or integrity can be questioned. So the next slide is about the count. And the post-nomination awareness session that I've talked about in a fortnight will provide you more information on the poll, postal votes and the count. But for the moment, what I can advise you is the count venue will be in Committee Room 1 here in the Council HQ in Almada Street. And the timing of the count will commence at 10 p.m. on Thursday, the 17th of September. The attendance at the count will be by pass only. So a pro forma will be provided at the next briefing session for candidates and agents for that purpose. In terms of arrangements for counting, information will be provided at the next session, and more detailed information on the count will be provided at the final briefing session, which will take place on Monday, the 7th of September. We have our own arrangements, our own plan in place around a public awareness campaign. So locally, in terms of web information, we have information on our web page, which you can find by going to www.southlanarkshire.gov.uk/elections. There are also tools at that page which allow voters to check where they go to vote and what support is available for them should they require it. Statutory notices are posted in suitable council buildings, libraries and halls in the Avondale and Stonehouse ward where possible, and also at the council HQ. We will be working with minority groups in the council area to encourage registration and participation. And there are election and electoral registration office helplines to assist voters or those who may not be familiar with the process. So what happens next? So essentially, that's us at the end of the update session today. Can I remind you of those two further sessions? The post-nomination session, Tuesday the 18th of August at 5 p.m, and the poll and count session, which is on Monday, the 7th of September at 5 p.m. I'd encourage you to attend those sessions to ensure that you're aware of the plans leading up to and on polling day and at the count. Both sessions will be here at the Council HQ or via Microsoft Teams. So basically, that's me at the end of this. Right, so this is the opportunity for any further questions that anybody's got. So I'll throw the floor open to yourselves.
Paul, would you like to give us, or maybe you'd like to keep that for the poll count session, but maybe give us an example of the quota system working? Is that something you'd like to do today? I mean, I could throw to you, a sample poll number, and maybe you could work from there. Or would you rather?
Probably
how it actually comes out in practice.
Probably it's essentially it's a series of arithmetic sums, right? Probably the best way to get an idea of how this works is to look at the published election results for previous elections, right? So I know, for example, for the last, I think I'm right in saying you can go online and you can see the published election results and how the quota system works from the 2022 election. I don't know, we had another by-election last month.
Sure.
Is that published online yet?
Yeah, so the results are all online and it's
Okay.
got it'll have reference to the quota, so you can look and see what that is. There's also within the pack a detailed note on how the STB system works. We appreciate it's quite wordy and it's hard to get your head around, but there are, again, on the Electoral Commission website, there is further instructions on how that voting system works. But it is essentially generated on the system.
As you know, you had the Lanarkshire by-election recently, and therefore that's another way of going back, looking at the turnout and then dividing by the one, and then the one and the plus one and the whatever. Yeah,
And that's
that little bit is the
and that's if you are keen to get a handle on how that works, right, and how that impacts on the results process. That's a really good place to start, right? If you go and have a look at that, Kate, when you see it written down, it sounds really complicated, right? When you see it work through, it'll maybe make a wee bit more sense.
okay. Okay.
Okay, right, so listen, if we don't have any other questions, I think that's us finished for this afternoon. And we've got that other session, which is a fortnight today. Again, same time, same place or places, right? So I'd encourage you to participate in that as well. So can I thank you for your attendance and your attention? And there'll be a link of the recording of this sent through to you.
Thank you.
Okay, listen, thanks very much. Good evening.